We are live here with Tricey Adams, founder and CEO of Black Millennials for Flint, and we're about to get into it, okay, about environmental justice, about education. We're about to talk about a plethora of awesome topics, and I'm so grateful for having you here with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So in normal fashion, let's hop straight into this interview, okay?
Yes.
All right. So, what made you want to get into education? And tell us about your journey as an educator, as you have a very remarkable story.
Yes, so I definitely have I don't want to say that it's a roller coaster. I'm going to say that it's a winding road that I've taken. So I originally at one point in my life, after I graduated from high school and went on to college, I was a nursing major. And I made it all the way to my junior year, and I started clinicals, and I hated it.
Oh no.
I hated it. I was like, I want to help people, but Lord, this is not it.
This is
This
not
is
it.
not my ministry. It wasn't it. And so while I was in undergrad, I had a scholarship. And so I was very actively engaged on campus with community service. So had a lot of different roles and positions on campus, which was really cool because I graduated from the University of Memphis. At that time, especially, was definitely predominantly white school. So I was really excited to have an opportunity to forcibly diversify the campus at that time. And so one of the things that was so just profound that happened during that time when I was an undergrad is I had an opportunity to volunteer with the Ivy Reading Academy. So yes, I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Yes. And so where the University of Memphis is located, literally right across the train tracks, there is one of the oldest Black communities in the country called Orange Mound. And I had an opportunity to volunteer with some youth at the high school, which is one of the first Black high schools in Memphis, Melrose High School. And beautiful, beautiful children. And there was this one young man, he was 16, and he had such a difficult time reading. I'm talking about really difficult, like even some of your foundational skills, this baby was lacking. And even though it was in that moment that I really began to understand the different layers of privilege. A lot of times we hear white privilege, but specifically in the Black community, you have to think about economic privilege as well. And so at that point, I was like, I'm going to be a teacher. And so my parents were like, look, you need to figure out what you want to do because you got this scholarship. If you stay there longer, you're going to be on your own. And so I did move forward. I taught for 5 years. I taught Spanish, which is fun. Yay! And so during that time, being in the classroom, I think all teachers are inherently activists and abolitionists. And I immediately learned that, like, I've got to do something bigger than just supporting my babies in my classroom. And so I taught in Nashville, decided, I want to get away from the South. I love, I'm back in the South now, but I'm like, I need to go see something else. Moved to the East Coast. Had a phenomenal experience living in the DC area. I still worked in education. I worked for Cesar Chavez Public Charter Schools for public policy. I know that was a mouthful, but it was at that point where I really became engaged on the legislative policy side of activism and servitude. And so fast forward, what I was able to do was to apply those same leadership skills that I picked up teaching, because teaching is very much so a leadership profession, and took that and somehow ended up like founding a nonprofit that's about environmental justice. So that's kind of like my story. I don't want to get too long-winded on that, but it definitely has been a journey.
Yes, and
Yes.
taking us through that journey, and that journey is yours because it's how you got to where you are today, and every moment of it is important. So thank you for sharing
Yes.
that with us. And so, what made you want to get involved in environmental justice? You've talked a little bit about that, but kind of
Yeah.
be more specific with it.
Yeah, so I, and I always introduce myself in this environmental justice space that I am an educator by trade and by ministry.
Yeah.
And essentially, what really changed my life was the Flint water crisis. So, even though the Flint water crisis happened in April of 2015, 2014, we actually didn't begin to learn about it until 2015, like from a national perspective.
Right.
So you're talking about folks had gone like a whole year without anybody listening. And at that particular time in 2015, I was a member of Thursday Network, the Greater Washington Urban League Young Professionals, whoop, whoop, go YPs. And I was vice president of that chapter at the time. And I was really frustrated, just to be transparent, about the lack of response from our legacy civil rights organizations. So at that particular time, and you think about time frames, so we've gone a whole year where people have been yelling, screaming, look at Flint, and it was almost 2 years before your legacy Black civil rights organizations started to really say something. And so I was just like, okay, well, I don't have time. So in millennial fashion, I was like, I'm just going to do something on my own.
Yeah.
And so I responded like many people responded in the beginning of the crisis, where I focused on just getting resources. And so I partnered with some other excellent young Black people in Buffalo, New York. Also partnered with some young professionals, Black young professionals down in Florida, and some adult people in Memphis. And so we were able to partner with Target, because it's expensive getting that water all the way across the country. And so we were able to distribute, I don't know how many pallets of water to Flint. And so, to be honest, like after I did that, I was like, okay, well, I have some peace in my spirit that, I did something to contribute. It was more than that, right? It was more than that. And so that January, in 2016, I met a beautiful young lady. Had not ever seen this young woman before in my life. We were actually having a new member orientation with Thursday Network, and the young lady, whose name is Michelle, she came up to me after the orientation, and she said, I really like, the work that you did to support Flint. And I was like, oh, cool, thanks, sis. And so then she went on to say, did you know that like lead is not just an issue in Flint? And so I'm looking at her like, she's about to tell me something, like, what's going on? And so, we know about lead, right? Like, we heard about lead paint chips, but to be honest, that's the extent that I knew at that time. And so what really hit me in the gut is when she said, did you know that Freddie Gray experienced childhood lead poisoning? So if you think about the timeline, you think about the uprisings and civil unrest that had just happened in 2015 surrounding the murder of Freddie Gray. And so I was already mad because people weren't speaking up the way that they should have about Flint. But then to learn, like, okay, so this is big, like this is a huge issue. And so I got that same tribe of people, and I was like, y'all, like, did you know that? Like, did you know that like lead, like, it's in water, it's in your home, it's in soil, it's in all these other things, and we're talking about quote unquote educated Black people. Child, we had no idea. We had no idea that it was to that extent. And so the reason why I keep giving dates is because it was a very quick turnaround. So in February 2016, February the 10th, I did a call. Like anybody, I put it on social media. I'm like, anybody across the United States and on the continent of Africa, whoever wants to join this call, we got to strategize. And so on that call, we came up with the name. I know we get a lot of pushback sometimes about the name. It's a spiritual connection to this name, right? So Flint changed the entire narrative from a national perspective around what environmental justice looks like and who the people look like that are directly impacted by environmental racism. And so that's how we all got started. Later on that year, in April, we took our first trip to Flint, Michigan. We partnered with some organizations in DC as well as Philadelphia. Dope, all Black folk. We went to Flint. We partnered with some organizations on the ground. We literally went door to door. Okay, door to door, hundreds of houses doing door to door water distribution. And we also brought youth with us from DC. And when we got back from Flint and got back to DC, I kid you not, the young people that were on that trip, that service trip, they got letters from their school saying that there were elevated lead levels in the water in their school. I'm talking about like within less than a week.
Wow.
I was already mad. Mad part two, like Rav at this point. And so at that point, we really started to shift as an organization and even thinking about like, dang, we got to be an organization, right? At first, this was just community service. And so that is kind of like where we started to tap into the political advocacy space, which we have been nonstop ever since then.
Amazing. And so tell us about from 2016 to now, your vision and your mission for the organization. You talked a little bit just now about like changing the, your frame of mind when you thought about this organization that was becoming. So tell us a little bit now about your mission and your vision for the organization.
Yeah, so what's really magical, and I always get excited about this, is within that same year in 2016, we also developed our 4-point action plan. Anybody that works in the in the nonprofit space knows how hard it is to come up with those core things you're gonna focus on. So the 4 things that we focus on is 1, direct resources to communities, Black and Latino communities explicitly, that are impacted by lead issues. We also focus on fund development to, 1, to emphasize Black and Latino philanthropy. So we do a lot of work with putting a spotlight like on Black individuals who have been so instrumental to providing resources, whether it's your time or treasure, to communities impacted by lead. And then the other thing that we focus on, the third item, is focusing on educational awareness. Now, this is really a core component of Black Millennials for Flint. Talking about lead is not sexy. It's just not. Just environmental justice issues are starting to become, more in mainstream. But that literally, I will, even though COVID-19 is the devil, but it really starts to put environmental justice issues on the forefront. But within the African American and Latino community, even though we are the most disproportionately impacted, we oftentimes know the least, right? So we go back to 2016, I had 3 degrees, I didn't know anything about this, right? And so we are really thriving in that area with raising awareness. But then the other part that we do is to instill leadership skills into the next generation of environmental justice activists. And so we established what is called the Lead Prevention Ambassador Program. And that is my baby. So you talk about bringing in this K through 12 mindset around teaching, because I'm still an educator, and it's been so phenomenal to see other Black and Latino leaders who are not environmentalists, but being onboarded into this space around how we can be champions for protecting the earth, that we all share as a people. So as far as like what I foresee in the future, we battle with this a lot, is capacity. So right now, we actually work out of 4 cities. So Flint, DC, Baltimore, and Memphis. And it pulls at our heartstrings because some, other cities, like I know Houston is definitely another spot, huge environmental issues in Houston, but we gotta, get our tribe bigger so that we can have a touch point in other places throughout the country. So just growth and manifest is a short answer to your question.
Okay, that's what we're all about. For sure. And so you spoke a little bit about how Black and Latino populations in the United States are a little bit more disproportionately impacted. So tell me, how do you feel environmental justice impacts our society, and what are some ways you're working towards solutions for some of the problems that we face, specifically in the areas that you're working in now, in the DC, in Flint, in the areas that you're working in now?
Yeah, so a big thing that we work on is around policy. And I know sometimes that whole concept is met with resistance. But here is the caveat. So we to date have helped to get, so the first, we got a bill passed in DC, which is mandatory testing for lead and water in schools. We have the same bill in the state of Tennessee that passed and recently got an amendment passed through the House. We also got 2 bills passed in the state of Maryland. We still trying to work on Michigan, my God. But the extra layer to that, that's kind of our next step, is around community accountability and oversight. And so what we mean by that is still equipping our community around utilizing their voice and their access and their influence, because community members have influence. You might not have money, but you got the power to vote, though. This person is not demanding, or not yielding to your demands, then you got to unseat them. And so the next phase of our work is really working to create tools that are transparent, where we can demonstrate to the community, like, this person that represents your community are not adhering to these policies that are meant to protect you. That's one part of it. The other part of it is to ensure that there are resources, going back to our number one point on our action plan, where Black and brown organizations always get the short end of the stick, especially in environmental justice organizations. The environmental justice movement was founded by Black people, okay? And the fact that you see these large, quote unquote, green organizations that are white, that are multi-million-dollar entities, while the Black and brown grassroots organizations are getting pennies. So we also work to not just ask for a seat at the table. Now we busting up in there. So we also are, becoming, working in, how I want to say this. We seek allyship where it is applicable with elected officials to tell them, like, you need to provide, like, this is the issue, this is the solution, this is how much it costs to meet this solution, what you gonna give?
What actionable steps are we taking right now?
Right. And so we are really excited to be thriving in that space. I would say that we have the greatest gains and success as far as establishing those allyships with elected officials in Flint. So Flint has a phenomenal mayor that was just brought in the latter part of last year in 2019. Definitely, we really have a lot of respect for him. He actually had a House seat in the state of Michigan. So it's really been cool to see him like utilize his experience working in the state legislature and then, bring that to his hometown. We also have a phenomenal rapport with a brother in DC, Robert White, at the Shout Him Out. He definitely is so vulnerable in the environmental justice space and has really worked hard and diligently with his staff to, one, become more educated and acclimated into that space, and then letting organizations like us, provide like some support and assistance, which is dope, right? You never heard that?
Hey.
Like council people, being like, hey, let's get together, let's talk, let's chat. So it's been exciting just to see the innovation and organizing with the work that we're doing.
Awesome. And so you mentioned a couple of bills that have been passed as a result of your efforts. What are 3 top moments from your career to date?
So 3 top moments. So 1, I'm going to shout out to Baltimore, specifically to the Baltimore, the Greater Baltimore Urban League and the Greater Baltimore Leadership Association, which is also a part of the Urban League family. So in October 2018, we had an opportunity to actually take part in a documentary that aired on BET. How that all, like, first of all, let me just say, never underestimate yourself and never think no one's looking. So we literally got hit up by a producer, and they were like, we've been looking at your work, we are interested in focusing on lead-based paint issues in Baltimore, like how can we partner? And so essentially what we were able to do, we rounded up the tribe, because that's our ministry, like we be reaching out, within the Black family, the Black and brown family. And so to have like an entity like BET to have that sort of investment in our work just is kind of surreal, right? I mean, you talk about vision, like that's it. Like we on Black entertainment television, like talking about environmental justice issues. That was phenomenal. The next thing that is really epic, and I was raised in a church. I'm a Southerner, so everything has a backstory, a good old anecdote. So we met Pastor Ezra Tillman and First Lady Katrina Tillman in 2017 in Flint, Michigan. And we actually had that connection with one of our community partners that's actually in the Richmond area, Tavares Taylor. Shout out to Tavares. He actually made the connection to First Trinity in Flint. Fell in love with them at first sight. And what was really moving about that particular trip that we made to Flint, like we worked with their deacons, where we did the same thing, door-to-door water distribution, but we came together to talk. It was like so reminiscent of what you hear about with civil rights activists, where you just sit down and just chat, like what we gonna do? How we gonna organize? And we asked Pastor Tillman, we said, out of all of the things that are happening in Flint, how can we help you? Because we don't want to come into this space and take over, right? Flint has every reason in the world to not trust people because people ain't right, and so we're like, you are here, you are doing the work. What can we do to contribute to your vision and to your ministry? And so he said 3 things. So the first one was he wanted the church to become a community, to have a community, be a water station, a community water station. And so we were like, okay. Like that's number 1. And then the other thing he talked about was at that point, they were interested in creating or starting a health center that was connected with the church. And we were like, woo, come on, ambitious goals, Pastor. And then the third thing was around, so Flint Flint has an aging population. Like there are young people there, there are millennials there, but it is quite transient. So a lot of young people, after they graduate and go to college, they oftentimes don't return. And so he was like, there needed to be like some coordination, like with the younger people that are still there. The older people in Flint, baby, they holding it down. Our elders have it together. And he was saying just like learning how to organize, learning about how to advocate. Now there are dope leaders in the city of Flint. I want to shout them out. Jasmine Hall, she's a Harvard graduate. She actually returned back to Flint, so yay. There's another sister, Naira Sharif. I mean, she has for years been advocating in Flint, and so we want, in all of our Black communities, for there to be a plethora of leaders, right? Not just, these set people who easily get burnt out. And so those are the three things that he said. Okay, so we actually, are getting to all of the three, but one of the three was epic. So we were able to make a connection between First Trinity and B. Jaden Smith, the son of Willie and Jaden Smith. I know, right? So we don't have coin like that. So we were like, ooh, a water station. Ooh. Like, I'm still an educator, and so that, I mean, was life-changing. The amount of effort and time that Jaden spent with the Tillmans, with other members of the Flint community, it's just been beautiful to watch. And so Jaden, like, physically would come to Flint for meetings with the Tillmans. One of our former team members with Black Millennials for Flint, she was very instrumental in just like helping to make sure, is the church going to be protected? We got our contracts and paperwork together. So it was just really beautiful to see how coalition building is so powerful. And again, like focusing on that influence piece, like you don't have to be a millionaire. Being a community bridge builder is also so lucrative. And so to date, so the first water box, of course, is at First Trinity, and now there are a total of 4 water boxes throughout the city of Flint. Ellen actually donated a water box also, so Jaden went on Ellen and kind of introduced the water box to the world. So that's the second thing that was pretty epic. And the third thing is when we got a bill passed. So I know that we had several, but that first one though. Like it was all the emotion, like like who I'm just like a girl from Whitehaven in Memphis, Tennessee. Like, I got a whole bill passed, right? And I'm not like a like trained like politician. Like I'm not I didn't major in political science. Right? And so that was really life-changing for me and really set the blueprint for how we've been able to be successful with getting other bills passed. So,
So amazing. I read about these things, but seeing you talk about them, it makes it more special.
Oh, yay!
And so how has the current climate of injustice that's going on right now, not just in Flint, but in other areas as well, and the pandemic, which has also affected us all, how has it affected you personally?
Yeah, so we are definitely a hands-on type of organization. So part of the work, even like with getting that bill passed, we did a lot of canvassing. A lot of canvassing. Even like you heard me mention with providing resources, we typically do door-to-door distribution or direct community engagement because we want to hear from community members. And so with COVID-19, like not being able to physically connect with the people we serve has been spiritually jarring. It really has been. We are in consistent like worry around like there's a digital divide. Yeah, it's cool, that we're able to converse right now using a technological platform, but we are very cognizant that everyone doesn't have that type of access. And so we're just really concerned about people falling in between the cracks that we could have reached had we not been in the pandemic.
Right.
The other part to this is with other environmental justice issues, not just necessarily like pertaining to lead, but with climate and extreme weather. So I think about, for example, Memphis is always hot, but I think about right now, like in New York, it's burning up in New York. New York is not about this life with it being that hot, And thinking about, like, I know for me, I have chronic asthma, which definitely comes from other environmental hazards. And just wearing a mask, I'm literally like about to pass out just trying to get some groceries, right? You think about like the elderly community, especially in communities that experience economic struggle. Like I know some people, from around the way, like where my parents grew up, they don't have central air conditioning, right? So there's just a myriad of things where this pandemic just, my God. But I will say it has forced us to be really creative. I would say that, and not to like make this like churchy, but churches have been coming through. I know we were able to do two things. So we go to Flint every year, more than one time a year, but we can't go. And we were able to donate several pallets of water to Flint. So even though we couldn't do our door-to-door distribution, we still wanted to make sure that we were consistent with sowing that seed into the Flint community. Here in Memphis, we were able to donate, I think, 150 lead prevention kits to the South Memphis community, which is the majority Black community. And that included things like things that will help you like clean up lead paint dust that may be throughout your house, educating people on you might need to get this tested because you live in an older house. We were able to make contributions in DC with the National Black United Front, able to make donations for them to give out clean water in their they distribute food once a month in Ward 8. So, it's not ideal. It definitely, has pushed our thinking around how do we make sure that we remain true to the people who we said that we were going to serve. But it's, we will prevail, but it is a challenge and a growing experience. I'll say that.
All about and moving forward in spite of the challenges that we might face.
Indeed.
And so we come to one of our last questions.
Okay.
So who are some of your heroes and sheroes, personally and professionally?
Okay, so even though it is cliche, I have to say my mommy. So I'm the only child. I'm 100% a mama's girl. My mom is where I get like my passion to give. I mean, she definitely got me, she got me beat. But when you talk about agape love, like my mom truly demonstrates that. I mean, just unconditional. She doesn't have to know you, doesn't necessarily have to have ever seen you before in her life, but her heart to give and to support, I mean, has just been such a blessing to me. My other favorite human being outside of my mama is the one and only Angela Davis. In my apartment right now, I got like different things with Angela Davis. But what really inspires me the most about Angela Davis is she is no nonsense and unapologetic. And so eloquent. Just get you together with just so much poise.
Yes.
And then my other third favorite human being, favorite person is none other than Fannie Lou Hamer. just being a Southern woman, a Southern Black woman, the fight that was within her, is reminiscent of the Black women in my family who, were very instrumental, in the civil rights movement. I'm what? Second generation Memphian from Memphis. Memphis is definitely a fighting city.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely know I'm super biased towards the sisters, but Black women, we're magical. So definitely some of my everyday heroes or sheroes.
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 Don't say Black girl magic for nothing.
Right.
Girl magic for nothing. And so, at the end of this interview, one question that I would like to ask is, what words would you like to leave us on this episode of the Black Motivation Podcast that we can take away from what you've given us thus far?
So the first word, and I'm going to use it again, is agape. And the reason why I chose the word agape first is a lot of times people will say, like, you don't live in Flint. You're not from Flint, girl. Why are you doing this work for Flint? It doesn't matter. Wherever there are Black people, that's my people.
Yes.
Period. You think about Martin Luther King's, like, where there's an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Yes. Wherever there are Black people, that's my community.
Yeah.
Right. So my other word is intersectionality. Woo! I think, as a people, we can't think about systemic oppression in silos. Everything is intertwined.
Yeah.
And I think that once we start pulling all of those different layers of oppression together, we'll really be able to strategically peel back those layers to truly seek liberation. All Black lives matter.
Yes.
Not just the bougie Black lives, not your hetero cis Black lives, all Black lives. So that's the other word that I lived. I was supposed to do 2 or 3 words.
You got 3.
I got 3. Okay. And my last word that I will leave you all with is just love. Just love in general. Not from an agape perspective, but just like allowing love to kind of be the core of everything that you do. Even if, and I have to think about this moment that we had an opportunity to meet with late, great Congressman John Lewis. We met him in 2017, and he just illuminated love. He told us, like, and we weren't expecting this, but he was like, you got to learn to engage the other side of the aisle. And we were like, what? And he was just like, but you got to make it human. You got to humanize the work. And so that's all grounded in love. So, yeah, that's my last word.
Thank you so much for this interview. It has touched me, and I'm so sure it will touch others and inspire and spark, conversation and interest in supporting your mission. By the way, how do we support you and find you on social media?
Yes, so on social media, you can definitely like our page, Black Millennials for Flint. Just type it in, it'll pop right up. We're also on Twitter at BM4Flint. And we're on Instagram at Black Millennials for Flint, and it's a number 4 and all of those. If you want to learn more about any of our programming that we have or milestones, like who are these people, you can go to www.blackmillennials4flint.org.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for joining us on this episode of